Hey Summoners, welcome back to another ProGuides video. In the past, we've given you guys a tip for every single champion, but what about playing against every champion? This time around, we'll go over one tip or trick for facing the entire cast of League of Legends. Since there are 159 champions and we want these tips to be useful, we'll be cutting the list into multiple videos. Make sure you stick around and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. Now let's get started with the list. We'll cover the first 80 champions in alphabetical order. The first champion on the list is Aatrox. If you get hit by his W, the quickest way out of the zone is to always go directly left to right. Never try to go up by moving backwards. After Ahri's new update, it's important to track her ultimate cooldown in your head. Remember that the cooldown starts after the first cast, which means that if Ahri gets a few resets and spaces out her dashes, her ultimate might be up in as little as 10 seconds. When Akali uses her R1, she can't use her R2 until 2.5 seconds have passed. As long as you see the first part go out, you can always be ready for the execution. Alistar's ult does not lower the true damage that he takes. This makes Kraken Slayer extra strong against him. A Mundo doesn't have any special tricks up his sleeve. Just make sure to stay aware of your surroundings. He can Q to a minion, jungle camp, or even the front line first before even flashing to ult on top of you. When facing a Nivea in lane, good players will use their wall to force your champion to path into her Q. Avoid this by shuffling forwards and backwards instead of side to side. Just because Annie is sitting at 2 stacks of her passive doesn't mean that you're safe. High-level Annie players can easily flash, E, W, and R to stun you when you least suspect it. Aphelios players usually try to fight with the green and white weapons. His sentry turret benefits from whatever attack speed and crit chance Aphelios has, so make sure you destroy it in a hectic teamfight. Before we continue on with the list, we just want to shout out our coaches over at ProGuides.com. If you struggle with the matchup, macro, or just want to figure out how to carry more games, our high elo staff can really help you out at any time. Now let's continue on with our next champion. When facing Ashe, abilities and items that provide flat amount of damage reduction are very effective. This means Amumu's W, Leona's W, and Randuin's Omen will make Ashe's Q barely do any damage. Remember that Azir follows whatever soldier that he chooses to dash towards. If you're able to get in the path of the soldier, then you'll force him to stop. Banshee's Veil isn't very good against Bard's stun. Even if you have a shield, he can still stun you if the second target is terrain. Not only does Blitzcrank's ultimate silence and cancel casts, but it also instantly breaks all shields that are applied. Make sure you don't accidentally use your locket or shields too early. Because Brand doesn't have a lot of percent base burn damage, a bit of magic resistance goes a long way, as long as they don't build too much HP. Rob can use his W on an ally minion, so make sure you don't overstep when you're facing him. The best time to do this is level 2, so be extra careful if you're playing a weaker lane. When Caitlyn pushes you under the tower, always be aware of the hidden areas under your turret. Make sure you avoid mindlessly walking into them. Camille's ultimate disrupts channels when she uses it on you. Make sure you don't cast something like a Malzahar ultimate when she's nearby. When Cass hits level 2, be extra careful if you get hit by her Q. It's very hard to win a trade unless you massively outrange her. It's really easy to dodge Cho'Gath's Q if you move unpredictably. As long as he doesn't cast it directly under you, there will always be a time to move out of the way. Corki's first package comes online at 10 minutes, and has a 5-minute flat cooldown every single time he picks it up. Make sure you play around this timer. If you're playing a melee champion, don't be afraid of dodging into Darius when you're fighting him. It may feel a little bit risky, but dodging the edge of his Q gives you a massive advantage, especially in the early levels. Don't overcommit to the fight if your champion isn't very strong early on. Good Diana players use his minions to engage on the enemy. Remember that Diana can use her E during her Q and still get a reset. When facing Mundo, try not to use all of your damage while he still has his W. You have to beat Mundo by forcing out his W and ultimate before you fully commit to a fight. Because of the way his axes work, Draven will always naturally push the wave. This makes him an easy target for ganks, so try to coordinate something with the rest of your team. You can always know when Echo has his ultimate by looking for his after image. However, you won't see it if Echo's out of your vision. Remember that Elise can repel into minions when she's ganking you. She can also use plants to get over walls. It may seem like a no-brainer, but control wards make it a lot harder for Evelynn to do anything. Make sure you're warding the river and other common entrances in the jungle. You can also pick up a sweeper when you're chasing her down. When Ezreal hits level 6, be careful if he steps into a brush or walks out of vision. If he's out of sight, it's a lot harder to react to his ultimate, which might chunk you out for a lot of your HP. If Fiddlesticks is the enemy jungler, don't be surprised if any of the 3 lanes gets ganked around 3 minutes. His Clara is very versatile, allowing him to set up whichever path that he wants to take. The classic tip for beating Fiora is to reset her vital proc if you're facing her. You can do this by walking far away enough until it disappears. Just make sure they don't miss out on any XP or CS. Fist is really annoying with how often he can become untargetable, but he can't dodge everything. Champions with on-hit effects, especially Blitzcrank and his E, can still go through during his initial dash of his E. When laning against Galio, it's another case of dodging forward and back instead of left and right. You want to dodge the trails from his Q, but make sure you don't get too close for an easy taunt. Do your best to mess with Gangplank's barrels during teamfights. As long as you show the enemy GP that you're auto-attacking his barrels, he'll have to slow down his combos. Facing Garen is all about trading while his skills are on cooldown. If he ever uses his spin for free, do your best to punish him. When Nara gets close to turning into his mega form, give him some space. Nara can jump onto his allies, even his minions, to close the distance for a good ultimate. Good Gragas players will abuse the damage reduction that his W gives. Save your skills until he auto-attacks, otherwise you'll be wasting your burst. A lot of players forget that you can block Graves' auto-attacks with any other unit. Fighting and minions work pretty well, and if you see an ally that's slow, try to position between them if you're playing a tank. Gwen's W gives her armor and magic resistance on top of projectile immunity. In general, avoid fighting inside her W entirely, and wait before you fully commit to a fight. If you see Hecarim running at you with Predator and Ghost, don't panic. As long as you have your flash up, use it once Hecarim commits his ease auto animation. Good Hecarim players will try to bait your mobility, so don't get too afraid. Heimerdinger's turrets will always shoot a laser if you get hit by his missiles or grenade. As long as you dodge the stun, you'll be able to walk out of the laser with tier 2 boots. Against Alawi, it's crucial to buy grievous wounds, especially when you want to actually try to kill her. When you do plan on fighting her, it's generally better to handle her 1v1 unless you know how to disengage after her ultimate. Irelia needs to set up her passive stacks before she can all-in you. Pay attention to the health of your minions so you don't give her an easy way to reach you. When facing Ivern, make sure you ward your jungle so you can catch him trying to counter jungle you. This is a great way to get yourself ahead, especially if your laners collapse when you ping them. In laning phase, sometimes Janet players like to charge their tornado in the bush. If you notice this, take advantage of Janet by engaging a fight while their Q is winding up. There's a high chance that she wasn't aiming to peel. Make sure you avoid a level 2 gank from Jarvan. If you can, do an early invade and place a ward to figure out where he's starting. Jax is a pretty simple champion. Just remember that he gets stronger if he blocks counterattacks with his E. Try to just wait for the sun to go off before you fully commit to the trade. A useful tip against Jace is to let him auto your minions early in the laning phase to force his wave to push. Jace is one of the easiest top laners to gank, so make him a juicy target for your jungler. Jin's worst enemy is dive. If you're able to pick a champion that can get on top of him easily, it'll be very difficult for him to kite around and CC you. In the late game, dying to Jinx will give her a massive spike in damage. If you're low on health and the fight is close, don't overcommit. You might just lose the fight for your team. When laning against Kaiser, make sure you don't step too far away from your minions. An isolated Q does a lot of damage, especially in the early game. Kalista can pierce multiple minions with her Q, so don't line up behind the low health minions to avoid easy poke. Also, her Q can transfer the spear stacks from the minions onto you if you get hit by it, so make sure you don't hide behind a minion that's about to die. When laning against Karma, stay away from your minions so she can't easily land Qs. It's also very hard to kill her without a lot of damage, so don't get baited in by her mantra W. If Karthus is on the enemy team, pay attention to where he dies in a fight. Don't sit in his W and try to fight. Move the fight outside of his range. I know this sounds very obvious, but we forget sometimes, you know? When facing Kassadin, you need to take advantage of his early game. Punish him on every CS, and make sure you ask your jungler to gank a few times before level 6. It may sound obvious, but having easy CC is crucial when you're facing Katarina. If your team doesn't pick any CC, take Exhaust unless you're playing something like top lane. Kayle is another champion that needs to be taken advantage of early on to stop her from getting out of control. If you see her farming side lanes, don't be afraid to coordinate a pick with your team. If Kayn ults you in a fight, he has to wait 0.75 seconds before he can jump out. You can use this time to forcefully reposition him into a different area of the fight. Against Kennen, always have your flank warded. Kennen is extremely powerful if he gets behind you. If Kha'Zix tries to counter jungle you, walk next to your jungle camp so you can avoid the isolation damage from his passive. Similar to facing Ivern, Kindred is another champion that you need to ward against. If you can catch her walk into a mark, you'll be ready to collapse with your team. Remember that Kled becomes untargetable if he loses Skarl. Make sure you don't let him turret dive you if you're low on health. Best time to trade against Kog'Maw is when his W is down. He loses a lot of power if it's on cooldown, so don't be afraid to step up and be aggressive. Good LeBlanc players will roam a bunch, so try and keep that extra eye on mid lane and see if she's roaming. When you get into a smite fight against Lee's Sin, always bait out his Q and then stop dealing damage. Lee's Q deals more damage based on missing health, so it's a lot easier for him to steal an objective. Be extra careful of Leona when she's sitting in an unwarded bush. It's very hard to react to her E animation if you can't see the initial part. And that's going to wrap it up for the list of tips so far. If you guys have any other good tips, let us know in the comments down below. It's pretty tough to come up with useful tips for some of the older champions, and we love to hear from you guys. Make sure you hit that sub button, and as usual, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.